The room fell silent as Amara stood on the wooden platform, her hands shaking slightly despite her efforts to appear calm. She wore a simple white dress that her mother had insisted upon, saying it would fetch a better price. The bright lights made her squint, and she could barely make out the faces of the men who sat in plush chairs, drinks in hand, eyeing her like she was nothing more than merchandise. Because to them that's exactly what she was. 20,000, called out a voice from the back. 25, countered another. Amara kept her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, trying to block out what was happening. Just yesterday she had been studying for her college entrance exams, dreaming of becoming a doctor. Today her parents had driven her to this mansion on the outskirts of town, explaining that their debts had become too great. They needed money and they had made a deal with some powerful people. A deal that involved her. "She's only 20, gentlemen. Pure as the driven snow," announced the auctioneer, a thin man with a voice that made Amara's skin crawl. "Her parents have guaranteed it." Amara felt a tear slide down her cheek but didn't dare wipe it away. She had begged her parents not to do this, but her father had slapped her hard across the face and told her to be grateful someone would pay good money for her. Her mother had simply looked away, counting the advance payment they'd already received. 100,000, a deep voice announced from the front row. The room went quiet. Even the auctioneer seemed surprised. 100,000 going once. The auctioneer said, scanning the room. No one challenged the bid. Amara finally lowered her gaze to see who had purchased her future. A tall man in an expensive suit stood up. He looked older, maybe in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and intense eyes that studied her without the leering quality the others had shown. Going twice, sold. To Mr. Daniel Hayes. Daniel Hayes. Amara had heard that name before. Everyone had. He owned half the businesses in the city, lived in a mansion overlooking the ocean, and rarely appeared in public since his wife had died 5 years ago. And now he owned her. As she was led off the platform, Amara caught a glimpse of her parents. Her father was smiling broadly as he shook hands with one of the organizers. Her mother was clutching an envelope that likely contained more money than they had ever seen. Neither of them looked at her. A woman in a neat pantsuit approached Amara. "I'm Mr. Hayes' assistant. Please come with me." Amara followed numbly, her future stretching before her like a dark, unknown road. She had heard stories about what happened to girls like her, sold to rich men. None of those stories had happy endings. Outside, a sleek black car waited. The assistant opened the door and Amara slid into the back seat. To her surprise, Mr. Hayes was not there. Instead, the assistant joined her and the driver pulled away from the mansion. "Where are we going?" Amara finally found her voice. "To Mr. Hayes' home," the assistant replied, her tone professional but not unkind. "He has gone ahead to make preparations." "Preparations for what?" Amara whispered, fear making her voice shake. The assistant looked at her for a long moment. "Mr. Hayes has his reasons for what he did today. I suggest you wait to hear them from him." Amara turned to look out the window as the city lights blurred past. Her life as she knew it was over. What waited for her now was something she couldn't begin to imagine. The car turned onto a private road that wound up a hillside. At the top stood a modern mansion of glass and stone, lit up against the night sky like a beacon. As they approached, Amara could see the ocean beyond, moonlight dancing on the waves. "We're here," the assistant said as the car stopped at the front entrance. "Mr. Hayes is waiting for you in the library." Amara stepped out of the car, her legs unsteady. The massive front door opened, and she walked into the most beautiful home she had ever seen. High ceilings, artwork on the walls, floors that gleamed in the soft lighting. The assistant led her through the house to a set of double doors. "Through here," she said, then turned and walked away, leaving Amara alone. Taking a deep breath, Amara pushed open the doors. The library was warm, filled with books from floor to ceiling. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace and beside it, in a leather chair, sat Daniel Hayes. He stood when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Amara," he said, her name sounding strange on his lips. "Please sit down." She remained standing, her chin lifted in defiance despite her fear. "Why did you buy me?" He gestured to a chair opposite his. "Please. I'll explain everything." Slowly, Amara moved to the chair and perched on its edge, ready to flee though she had nowhere to go. Daniel Hayes returned to his seat, studying her with those intense eyes. "What happened tonight should never have taken place. It was illegal, immoral, and I intend to make sure the people responsible are punished." Amara blinked in confusion. "Then why were you there? Why did you pay for me?" "Because I needed to get you out," he said simply. I've been working with law enforcement to break up this trafficking ring for months. When I learned they were planning to auction a young woman tonight, I made sure I was on the guest list. Hope flickered in Amara's heart. So, I'm not? You're not my property, he said firmly. You're a free person who was nearly victimized by criminals, including, I'm sorry to say, your parents. Tears welled in Amara's eyes, a mix of relief and renewed pain at her parents' betrayal. The police will be arresting everyone involved tonight, including your parents, Daniel continued. You're safe now. You can stay here as my guest until arrangements can be made for your future. Amara let the tears fall freely now. Thank you, she whispered. Daniel nodded, his expression softening slightly. You should rest. Tomorrow will be a difficult day, but you'll get through it. As Amara followed a housekeeper to a guest room, she felt something she hadn't expected to feel again so soon: hope. She didn't know what would happen next, but for tonight at least she was safe. What she didn't know was that Daniel Hayes had his own reasons for being so invested in stopping what had happened to her. Reasons that went far beyond his work with the police. Reasons tied to secrets from his past that he had never shared with anyone. The morning light streamed through gauzy curtains, waking Amara from the deepest sleep she'd had in weeks. For a moment she forgot where she was, stretching contentedly in the softest bed she'd ever felt. Then reality crashed back and she sat up with a gasp. The room around her was beautiful, cream walls, elegant furniture, and a view of the ocean that took her breath away. A far cry from the tiny bedroom she'd shared with her younger sister back home. Home. The word felt hollow now. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called, pulling the plush comforter up to her chin. The door opened to reveal a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun. Good morning, Miss Amara. I'm Mrs. Chen, the housekeeper. I've brought you some clothes and breakfast. She wheeled in a small cart with a covered tray and laid a stack of clothing on a nearby chair. Mr. Hayes thought these might fit you. They belong to his daughter, who's away at university. He has a daughter? Amara asked, surprised. Mrs. Chen nodded. Isabel. She's 22, not much older than you. Mr. Hayes also asked me to inform you that Detective Williams will be here at 11 to take your statement. Amara's stomach tightened. About last night? Yes, dear. But don't worry. Mr. Hayes will be with you the whole time if you want him to be. Mrs. Chen smiled reassuringly. Now eat your breakfast while it's hot. I'll come back in an hour to show you around the house. After Mrs. Chen left, Amara uncovered the tray to find a feast. Fluffy scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, toast with jam, fresh fruit, and orange juice. She realized she was starving and ate everything, wondering when food had last tasted this good. The clothes fit well enough. Jeans and a simple blue sweater that was probably casual wear for Daniel's daughter but nicer than anything Amara had owned. After washing up in the ensuite bathroom, which had both a shower and a bathtub, something she'd only seen in movies, she felt almost like herself again. Mrs. Chen returned as promised and gave her a tour of the mansion. Amara tried not to gawk at the indoor swimming pool, home theater, and art collection that probably cost more than her entire neighborhood. And this is Mr. Hayes' study, Mrs. Chen said, pausing outside a closed door. He's in there now on a conference call. He asked to see you when you're ready before the detective arrives. Amara nodded, suddenly nervous. In the light of day, Daniel Hayes seemed even more intimidating, a powerful billionaire who had swooped in to save her like some modern-day knight. But why? What did he want from her? I'll wait here until you're finished, Mrs. Chen said kindly, as if sensing her anxiety. Amara knocked softly on the study door. Come in, called the now familiar deep voice. Daniel Hayes stood behind a large desk, looking out at the ocean view. He turned when she entered, and Amara was struck again by how tall he was. His face was handsome in a rugged way, with lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. Amara, did you sleep well? He asked. Yes, thank you, she replied. And thank you for the clothes and breakfast and everything. He gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. No need to thank me. What happened to you should never have happened to anyone. Amara sat, gathering her courage. Mr. Hayes. Daniel, please. Daniel, she corrected. I'm grateful for what you did, but I don't understand why you're helping me. You could have just called the police. He returned to his chair, considering her question. Sometimes the police move too slowly. I had reliable information that you were in immediate danger. I made a judgment call. But you don't know me, Amara persisted. You spent $100,000 on a stranger. A shadow passed over his face. Money means nothing if it can't be used to help people in need. He paused. Besides, this isn't the first time I've encountered this particular trafficking ring. They've been operating for years, targeting vulnerable girls and young women. Something in his tone made Amara curious. How do you know so much about them? Before he could answer, there was a knock at the door and Mrs. Chen poked her head in. Detective Williams has arrived, sir. Daniel stood. We'll talk more later. For now, just tell Detective Williams everything you can remember. Every detail helps build the case against these criminals. The next 2 hours were difficult. Detective Williams, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a gentle manner, asked Amara question after question. How had her parents first mentioned the arrangement? Had she heard any names mentioned at the auction? Could she describe the other men present? Through it all, Daniel sat beside her, a solid presence that somehow made the ordeal bearable. When Amara's voice cracked describing how her father had hit her when she refused to go, Daniel's hand clenched into a fist, but his face remained calm. You've been very brave, Amara, Detective Williams said when they finished. We've already arrested your parents and several others involved in the auction. With your testimony, we can make sure they face serious charges. What will happen to my little sister? Amara asked suddenly. Zara is only 12. She can't be alone. She's with your aunt right now, the detective assured her. Child Services is involved, but your aunt has expressed interest in taking custody. Relief flooded Amara. Aunt May had always been kind to them, even when their parents had forbidden contact after some family disagreement years ago. After Detective Williams left, Daniel suggested they have lunch on the terrace. The day was warm, the sky a perfect blue, and the ocean stretched endlessly before them. It felt surreal to be sitting there eating gourmet sandwiches prepared by Daniel's personal chef, when just yesterday she'd been merchandise. What happens now? Amara finally asked, setting down her glass of lemonade. Daniel studied her thoughtfully. That depends on what you want, Amara. You're an adult, legally free to make your own choices. I don't have anywhere to go, she admitted. Our house was mortgaged to the hilt. I was working part-time to save for college, but my father took my savings months ago. What were you planning to study? Medicine, she said, a flicker of her old dreams returning. I've always wanted to be a doctor. Daniel nodded as if confirming something to himself. I have a proposition for you then. Stay here as my guest. Not as anything else, he added quickly, just as someone who needs a safe place while rebuilding their life. I can help you apply for scholarships, or if none are available, I would be willing to fund your education myself. Amara stared at him in shock. Why would you do that for me? A sad smile touched his lips. Let's just say I'm in a position to help, and I believe in paying forward the kindness others have shown me in my life. She sensed there was more to it than that but didn't press. I don't know what to say. Say yes, he replied simply. Let me help you, Amara. Looking into his eyes, she saw no hidden agenda, no expectation, just a genuine desire to help. Still, she hesitated. I can't just accept so much from a stranger. Then let's not be strangers, Daniel said. Stay, get to know me in my home and decide if my offer feels right to you. No obligations, no strings attached. You're free to leave anytime. Put that way, it was hard to refuse. Amara had nowhere else to go, and the thought of starting college, a dream she'd thought lost, was too tempting to walk away from. Okay, she said finally. I'll stay. For now. Daniel smiled, the expression warming his serious face. Good. Now, would you like to see the library again? Mrs. Chen mentioned you were eyeing the books last night. As they walked back into the house, Amara felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Her future, which had seemed so bleak just 24 hours ago, now held possibilities she'd never imagined. And though she still didn't fully understand why this wealthy stranger had chosen to change her life so dramatically, she was beginning to think that maybe, just maybe, good people still existed in the world. What she didn't know was that Daniel Hayes was fighting demons of his own. Demons that had driven him to that auction house on a mission that was far more personal than he'd admitted. Demons that had haunted him since the death of his wife, and perhaps even before. After a week in Daniel's mansion, Amara had settled into a routine. Mornings were spent in the library, reading books she'd only dreamed of accessing before. Afternoons often found her walking on the private beach below the property or swimming in the indoor pool. In the evenings, she and Daniel would have dinner together, talking about everything from world politics to favorite movies. Daniel, she discovered, was much warmer than his public persona suggested. He listened intently when she spoke, valued her opinions, and never made her feel like a charity case. At 53, he was more than twice her age, but Amara found herself increasingly comfortable in his presence. Yet there was something guarded about him too. Certain topics, particularly his late wife Jennifer, seemed off limits. When Amara asked about the photos of the beautiful blonde woman that adorned his study, Daniel had simply said, "She died 5 years ago," and changed the subject. Daniel's daughter, Isabel, remained a mystery as well. Though her presence was felt throughout the house, her books on shelves, her artwork on walls, she never called or visited. When Amara asked why, Daniel merely said that Isabel was busy with her final year at Princeton and preferred to stay on campus. On the 8th day, Amara was curled up in a window seat in the library when Daniel found her. "Enjoying Austen?" he asked, nodding at the copy of Pride and Prejudice in her hands. "It's my 3rd time reading it," she admitted with a smile. "But never in such a beautiful edition." He sat down across from her, his expression serious. "Amara, there's something I need to discuss with you." She closed the book, suddenly alert. "Is something wrong?" "No," he assured her. "But Detective Williams called this morning. Your parents' bail hearing is tomorrow. The prosecution has a strong case, but these things can be unpredictable." Amara felt a chill. "Do I need to testify?" "Not at the bail hearing. That will come later at the trial." Daniel hesitated. "There's something else. Your sister has been asking to see you." "Zara?" Amara sat up straighter. "How is she? Is she okay with Aunt May?" Daniel nodded. "By all accounts she's settling in well. Your aunt seems like a good woman. She's requested permission for Zara to visit you here this weekend. I told her that was entirely up to you." Tears welled in Amara's eyes. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed her little sister until that moment. "I'd like that very much." "Good. I'll make the arrangements." Daniel smiled, then glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting in the city, but I should be back for dinner. Feel free to use the home theater if you get bored with Mr. Darcy." After he left, Amara tried to return to her book, but her mind kept wandering. She hadn't been entirely honest with Daniel. While she missed Zara desperately, the thought of reconnecting with any part of her old life frightened her. Would Zara blame her for their parents' arrest? Would seeing her sister bring back the trauma of that night at the auction house? Unable to concentrate, Amara decided to explore parts of the mansion she hadn't yet visited. Most doors were unlocked, revealing guest bedrooms, storage rooms, and even a small gym. But when she reached the end of the west wing, she found a door that wouldn't open. Curiosity piqued, she was about to try again when Mrs. Chen's voice came from behind her. "That room belongs to Mr. Hayes's late wife," the housekeeper said quietly. "It's been locked since she passed." Amara jumped, embarrassed at being caught snooping. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Mrs. Chen waved away her apology. "No need to be sorry. This house is your home now, at least for the time being. It's natural to explore." She hesitated, then added, "Mr. Hayes keeps that room as a sort of memorial. He goes in sometimes, but no one else does." "How did she die?" Amara asked, unable to help herself. "Jennifer, I mean." A shadow passed over Mrs. Chen's face. "It was a terrible accident. A boating accident 5 years ago. Mr. Hayes was never the same afterward." She sighed. "Until recently, that is. He seems lighter since you arrived." Amara felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure that's just coincidence." Mrs. Chen gave her a knowing look but said nothing more about it. "Come, I was just about to prepare lunch. Would you like to learn how to make proper dumplings?" It was Miss Isabel's favorite lesson when she was younger. The afternoon passed pleasantly in the kitchen, with Mrs. Chen teaching Amara family recipes passed down through generations. By the time they finished, Amara had almost forgotten about the locked door and what secrets it might hold. Almost, but not quite. That evening, dinner with Daniel was quieter than usual. He seemed distracted, checking his phone several times. Unusual for someone who typically gave her his full attention. "Is everything okay?" Amara finally asked as they finished dessert. Daniel set down his phone with a sigh. "Just business complications. Nothing for you to worry about." "I may not understand business matters, but I'm a good listener," she offered. He smiled at that. "It's a long, boring tale of corporate politics. But thank you." He paused. "Actually, there is something I wanted to discuss with you. I've been thinking about your education." "My education?" "Yes. The fall semester starts in just over a month. If you're interested, I could arrange for you to take the entrance exams for the university here. It's not quite as prestigious as some, but the pre-med program is excellent." Amara's heart raced. College had seemed like an impossible dream just weeks ago. That would be amazing, but I haven't studied for the exams. And my high school grades were good but not exceptional. "I've arranged for a tutor to help you prepare," Daniel said. As for your grades, I've seen how quickly you absorb information. I have no doubt you'll do well. Why are you doing all this for me? The question had been on her mind for days. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Because I believe in you, Amara. And because I know what it's like to have dreams that seem out of reach. Before she could press further, his phone rang. Looking at the screen, he frowned. I need to take this. Excuse me. Alone at the table, Amara's thoughts whirled. Daniel's generosity continued to baffle her. Men like him, rich, powerful, usually wanted something in return. Yet he had never so much as hinted at any expectation beyond her accepting his help. After dinner, unable to sleep, Amara wandered back to the library. To her surprise, the light was on, and she found Daniel sitting in one of the leather chairs, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring at an old photograph. I'm sorry, she said, turning to leave. I didn't mean to intrude. Stay, he said, his voice rougher than usual. Please. Hesitantly, she approached, catching a glimpse of the photo in his hands. It showed a younger Daniel with his arm around a beautiful black woman who was decidedly not the blonde Jennifer from the study photos. Who is she? Amara asked softly, sitting across from him. Daniel gazed at the photo for a long moment before answering. Her name was Sophia. She was my first wife. I didn't know you were married before Jennifer. Few people do. It was a long time ago. He took a sip from his glass. Today would have been her birthday. Something in his expression made Amara's heart ache. What happened to her? Daniel's eyes met hers, filled with an old pain. She died. During childbirth, while delivering Isabel. Amara gasped softly. I'm so sorry. Isabel never knew her, Daniel continued, his voice distant. I married Jennifer when Isabel was 3. She was a good stepmother and Isabel loved her. When Jennifer died in that boating accident, it was like losing a mother all over again for Isabel. Is that why Isabel stays away? Because of the memories? Daniel nodded slowly. Partly. But it's more complicated than that. He set down the photograph carefully. Isabel blames me for Jennifer's death. She was on that boat because I was too busy with work to join them on vacation. If I had been there. It was an accident, Amara said gently. You couldn't have known. Perhaps. He finished his drink. Isabel and I haven't spoken more than a few sentences to each other in the past year. She takes her trust fund money but wants nothing else from me. The sadness in his voice made Amara reach out, briefly touching his hand. I'm sure she'll come around eventually. Family is family. A bitter smile touched his lips. You still believe that after what your parents did? Amara withdrew her hand, stung by the reminder. That's different. Is it? Daniel leaned forward. Both our stories involve family betrayal, Amara. The difference is that your parents betrayed you for money, while I betrayed my family with neglect. The raw honesty in his voice surprised her. This vulnerable side of Daniel was new, and it made him seem more human, less like the untouchable billionaire who had rescued her. We all make mistakes, she said quietly. What matters is what we do afterward. Daniel studied her face, his expression softening. You're wise beyond your years, you know that? Amara smiled slightly. Not wise. Just someone who's learned that holding on to anger hurts no one but yourself. A lesson I'm still learning, apparently. Daniel stood, placing the photograph carefully on a shelf. It's late. We should both get some rest. Your sister will be here tomorrow. As Amara headed back to her room, she found herself thinking about Daniel's revelations. The locked room, the estranged daughter, 2 dead wives. There was more to Daniel Hayes than she had imagined. Instead of making her wary, these glimpses of his pain only made her feel closer to him. What she didn't realize was that Daniel had shared only parts of his story, the parts he could bear to tell. The deepest secrets, the ones that had driven him to that auction house on that fateful night, remained buried. Secrets that, if revealed, might change everything between them. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Amara woke early, too nervous about Zara's visit to sleep in. She changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple blouse. Comfortable but nicer than anything she'd owned before coming to Daniel's house. Daniel found her pacing in the kitchen at 8, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold on the counter. Nervous? He asked, pouring himself a cup. What if she hates me? Amara blurted out. What if she blames me for Mom and Dad being arrested? Daniel's expression softened. From what Detective Williams told me, your sister was the one who called your aunt when your parents took you away that night. She knew something was wrong. This was news to Amara. Zara called Aunt May? Yes. Your aunt tried to intervene but arrived too late. She immediately contacted the police. Daniel hesitated. I don't think I'm overstepping by saying your sister loves you very much. Relief flooded through Amara. Thank you for telling me that. They ate breakfast together, Daniel calmly discussing plans for the day while Amara picked at her food. By 9:30 she was back to pacing, this time in the grand foyer, waiting for the sound of a car on the driveway. When it finally came, just after 10, Amara's heart leapt into her throat. The front door opened and there was Zara, small for her 12 years, her braided hair adorned with colorful beads that clinked softly as she moved. Amara. Zara broke away from Aunt May and flew across the foyer, throwing herself into her big sister's arms. Amara caught her, hugging her tightly, tears streaming down her face. Zara. Oh, I've missed you so much. I was so scared, Zara whispered against her shoulder. When Dad took you away, I thought I'd never see you again. I'm here now, Amara assured her, pulling back to look at her sister's face. And I'm not going anywhere. Aunt May approached more slowly, her kind face creased with concern. Amara. It's good to see you safe. Amara hugged her aunt, inhaling the familiar scent of the jasmine perfume she'd worn for as long as Amara could remember. Thank you for taking care of Zara. And for calling the police. Family looks after family, Aunt May said firmly. Real family, not people who share blood but have no love in their hearts. Daniel, who had been hanging back to give them privacy, stepped forward. Miss Chin, welcome to my home. I'm Daniel Hayes. Aunt May studied him with shrewd eyes. So you're the man who saved my niece. I only did what anyone would do, Daniel said. No, Aunt May contradicted him bluntly. Most people would not have risked themselves to help a stranger. I thank you for your courage and generosity. Daniel inclined his head in acknowledgement. Please make yourselves comfortable. Mrs. Chin, my housekeeper, no relation I believe, has prepared refreshments in the garden room. Amara can show you the way. As they walked through the mansion, Zara's eyes grew wider with each passing room. You live here now? She whispered to Amara. For now, Amara confirmed. Daniel, Mr. Hayes, has been very kind to me. Aunt May, overhearing, gave Amara a searching look but said nothing. In the garden room, a beautiful glass-enclosed space filled with tropical plants, they found a table set with tea, lemonade, and an assortment of pastries. Mrs. Chin had outdone herself, even including the dumplings she and Amara had made the day before. Once they were settled with drinks and food, Zara couldn't contain her questions any longer. What happened that night? Why did Mom and Dad sell you? Did that rich man really buy you? Zara, Aunt May cautioned. Perhaps some things are best not discussed. It's okay, Amara said, though her heart raced. She deserves to know. Taking a deep breath, she explained a simplified version of events. How their parents had accumulated gambling debts, how they had arranged to sell her to pay those debts, and how Daniel had intervened to rescue her, working with the police to arrest everyone involved. So he didn't really buy you? Zara asked, looking confused. No, Amara said firmly. He pretended to get me out safely. I'm here as his guest, nothing more. Aunt May's expression relaxed slightly at this clarification. And what are your plans now, Amara? You're welcome to come live with us, of course. Amara glanced out the window where she could see Daniel in the distance, taking a business call while walking along the bluff overlooking the ocean. Daniel has offered to help me apply to college. The fall semester starts soon, and he thinks I might still be able to get in. College? Zara's face lit up. You always wanted to go to college. Yes, Amara smiled, touched by her sister's enthusiasm. To study medicine like I always dreamed. Aunt May nodded slowly. That's a generous offer. But Amara, you must be careful not to become too dependent on Mr. Hayes' charity. All gifts come with expectations even if they're not stated outright. Daniel's not like that, Amara said, perhaps too quickly. He just wants to help. Men like him always have reasons for what they do, Aunt May persisted. I'm not saying his intentions are bad, only that you should keep your eyes open. Before Amara could defend Daniel further, Zara changed the subject, eager to tell Amara about her new school and the friends she was making in Aunt May's neighborhood. The moment passed, but Aunt May's warning lingered in Amara's mind. They spent the day together, with Amara showing Zara around the grounds, the pool, the private beach, the gardens. Daniel joined them for lunch but otherwise gave them space, seeming to understand Amara's need for time alone with her family. As the afternoon waned, Zara grew quieter, clinging to Amara's hand as they walked back toward the house. Do you have to stay here? She finally asked. Couldn't you come live with me and Aunt May? Amara knelt to eye level with her sister. I could, but think about it, Zara. If I go to college here, I can see you every weekend. And when I become a doctor, I'll be able to take care of both of us no matter what. Zara bit her lip. Promise you won't forget about me? Never, Amara vowed, hugging her tightly. You're my sister. Nothing will ever change that. When it was time for them to leave, Daniel appeared with a gift. A new tablet for Zara, already loaded with educational games and books. So you and Amara can video chat whenever you want, he explained, showing Zara how to use the pre-installed app. Zara's delight was immediate, but Aunt May looked troubled. That's very generous, Mr. Hayes, but it's too expensive a gift. Not at all, Daniel said smoothly. My company manufactures these. Consider it marketing. Zara can tell all her friends how much she loves it. This explanation seemed to satisfy Aunt May, though Amara suspected the tablet was far more costly than Daniel implied. As they said their goodbyes at the front door, Aunt May pulled Amara aside for a private word. Be careful, niece. Your heart is tender right now, and gratitude can easily be mistaken for other feelings. Amara frowned. What do you mean? I see how you look at him, Aunt May said gently. He's your rescuer, your benefactor. That creates a powerful bond. Just make sure any choices you make come from a place of strength, not dependency. Before Amara could respond, Zara bounded over for one last hug. The moment for further discussion was lost, but Aunt May's words echoed in Amara's mind as she watched their car disappear down the driveway. Your aunt doesn't approve of me, Daniel observed, coming to stand beside her. Amara turned to him in surprise. She's just protective. She doesn't know you like I do. A smile touched his lips. And how well do you know me, Amara? The question caught her off guard. How well did she know this man who had saved her, housed her, promised her education and freedom? Who had shared pieces of his past but kept other parts hidden behind locked doors? I know enough, she said finally. I know you're a good man. Daniel's eyes held hers for a long moment. I've tried to be. Not always successfully. He glanced at his watch. I have some work to finish before dinner. Why don't you take some time for yourself? Your sister's visit must have been emotional. Alone in her room afterward, Amara replayed the day in her mind. Seeing Zara had been wonderful, and knowing her sister didn't blame her for what had happened lifted a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. But Aunt May's warning troubled her. Was she developing feelings for Daniel? The thought had never fully formed in her mind before, but now that Aunt May had voiced it, Amara couldn't deny a certain truth to it. She admired him certainly. Found his presence comforting. Sometimes caught herself watching him when he wasn't looking. But that was natural, wasn't it? He had saved her from a terrible fate. Gratitude was normal. Whatever she felt beyond that was surely just confusion, her emotions scrambled by all she'd been through. Wasn't it? The weeks following Zara's visit passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Daniel arranged for a tutor to help Amara prepare for college entrance exams. 5 days a week, Dr. Eleanor Reed, a retired professor with a no-nonsense manner and brilliant mind, arrived to drill Amara on everything from biology to calculus. You have potential, Dr. Reed told her after their first week. Raw, untapped potential. With hard work you could go far. Amara threw herself into studying, grateful for the distraction from her confusing feelings about Daniel. When she wasn't with Dr. Reed, she was in the library, books spread around her, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. She had always been a good student, but now, with proper resources and support, she excelled. Daniel watched her progress with quiet pride. Though busy with his companies, he made time each evening to ask about her studies, sometimes helping her work through particularly difficult concepts. His patience and genuine interest touched Amara deeply. Their dinners together became the highlight of her days. Daniel was widely read and had traveled extensively, and he shared stories that made the world beyond her limited experience come alive. In turn, she made him laugh with tales from her childhood, the good parts before money troubles had turned her parents bitter. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, they sat on the terrace after dinner, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. Dr. Reed says you're ready for the entrance exams, Daniel remarked, swirling the wine in his glass. She's never seen someone progress so quickly. Amara smiled, pleased by the praise. I've had excellent help. The university admissions office has agreed to review your application for late admission, he continued. If all goes well, you could start classes next month. Daniel, I can't thank you enough for all this, Amara said earnestly. You've given me my dream back when I thought it was lost forever. He shook his head. You've done the hard work. I just opened a door. A comfortable silence fell between them as they watched the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. In the fading light, Daniel's profile was strong and dignified, his silver-streaked hair catching the golden glow. "May I ask you something personal?" Amara ventured. Daniel turned to her, an eyebrow raised. "Of course." "That night at the auction." She hesitated, unsure how to phrase her question. "You said you were working with law enforcement to break up the trafficking ring. But there's more to it than that, isn't there?" His expression shuddered slightly. "What makes you say that?" "The way you looked at me that night. Not like the others, but like you recognized something. And Mrs. Chin mentioned you've been different since I arrived." Amara took a deep breath. "Plus there's the locked room. Jennifer's room." Daniel was quiet for so long that Amara thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he set down his wine glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You're right," he said, his voice low. "There is more to the story." He looked out at the darkening ocean. "Jennifer wasn't my second wife. She was my third." Amara's eyes widened in surprise. "After Sophia died giving birth to Isabel, I was devastated," Daniel continued. "I threw myself into building my business, leaving Isabel with nannies most of the time. It was wrong, but I couldn't bear to look at her. She reminded me too much of Sophia." "That must have been hard for both of you," Amara said softly. Daniel nodded. "By the time Isabel was 3, I realized I was failing as a father. I hired a young woman named Claire as a live-in nanny, hoping Isabel would bond with her. What I didn't expect was to fall in love again." "Claire was your second wife?" "Yes. We married when Isabel was 4. She was wonderful with Isabel, patient and loving in all the ways I couldn't be then." A shadow crossed his face. "But Claire had a troubled past. She'd escaped an abusive family, put herself through school, remade her life. Or so I thought." Daniel fell silent again, lost in memory. Amara waited, sensing he needed to tell this story at his own pace. "What I didn't know was that Claire had struggled with addiction before we met. She'd been clean for years, but the pressure of suddenly being a billionaire's wife, thrust into the public eye, it was too much. She relapsed." His voice grew strained. "I was blind to it at first, making excuses for her behavior, her absences. By the time I accepted the truth, things had spiraled out of control." "What happened?" Amara asked gently. "I tried to get her help. Multiple rehabilitation centers, the best therapists. Nothing worked for long." Daniel's hands clenched. "One night, she took Isabel, who was 7 by then, and disappeared. I was frantic, called the police, hired private investigators. 3 days later, they found them in a hotel room in Atlantic City. Claire had passed out from an overdose. Isabel was alone, hungry, terrified. Amara's heart ached for the child Isabel had been. That's awful. Claire agreed to divorce me and enter a long-term treatment facility. I got full custody of Isabel. For years, I had no contact with Claire." Daniel's voice grew even quieter. "Then, 5 years ago, my assistant brought me a news article. Claire had been found dead in a cheap motel. She'd been trafficked by her drug dealer to pay off debts." Amara gasped softly. "Oh, Daniel." "The police investigation revealed she'd been sold multiple times over a period of months before her death. The same trafficking ring that was operating at the auction where I found you." His eyes met hers, filled with old pain. "So you see, when I learned about you, it wasn't just about breaking up a criminal operation. It was personal." Understanding dawned on Amara. "That's why you were there that night. Not just to help law enforcement, but because of Claire." Daniel nodded. "I couldn't save her. But I could try to save someone else." "And Jennifer? Where does she fit in this story?" "I met Jennifer a year after Claire's death. She was kind, stable, exactly what Isabel and I needed. We married quickly, too quickly perhaps. She tried to be a mother to Isabel, but by then, Isabel was a teenager who'd been through too much trauma. They never quite connected." Daniel sighed. "When Jennifer died in that boating accident, Isabel blamed me for not being there to prevent it, just as I hadn't been there to prevent what happened with Claire." The weight of Daniel's past settled between them. Amara's mind whirled with this new information, pieces falling into place. His determination to help her, his estrangement from Isabel, the locked room that must contain memories too painful to face daily. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. Daniel looked at her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "I wanted you to understand why I helped you, why I want to help you build a future. It's not charity or pity, Amara. It's—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Redemption?" she suggested quietly. A sad smile touched his lips. "Perhaps." Or maybe just the hope that something good can come from so much pain. Impulsively, Amara reached across the space between them and took his hand. It was warm and strong in hers, and when his fingers closed around hers, something shifted between them, something neither was ready to name. They sat that way as stars appeared in the darkening sky, connected by touch and by the shared understanding of what it meant to lose everything and try to rebuild a life from the wreckage. What Amara didn't yet realize was that Daniel's revelations, while deeply personal, still didn't tell the whole story. There were darker truths he kept hidden, truths that connected them in ways she couldn't imagine, truths that, if revealed, might destroy the fragile trust growing between them. The day of Amara's entrance exams arrived hot and humid, the kind of late summer day that shimmered with heat waves. Daniel insisted on driving her himself rather than sending his chauffeur. "For luck," he said, giving her a reassuring smile as they pulled away from the mansion. Amara's stomach was a knot of nerves. "What if I fail?" "You won't," Daniel said with such certainty that she almost believed him. "But even if today doesn't go as planned, there are other paths to your goal. This is just one day, Amara. It doesn't define your future." His calm confidence steadied her, and by the time they reached the university campus, Amara felt ready to face the challenge. Daniel walked her to the building where the exams would be held. "I'll be right here when you finish," he promised. On impulse, he leaned forward and kissed her forehead. "Good luck, though you don't need it." The gesture was so unexpected that Amara stood frozen for a moment, her skin tingling where his lips had touched. Before she could process what it meant, a proctor called for examinees to enter, and the moment was lost. The exams were grueling, 6 hours of intense concentration, testing everything from critical thinking to scientific knowledge. When Amara finally emerged, exhausted but cautiously optimistic, she found Daniel waiting as promised, reading something on his phone with a furrowed brow. "How did it go?" he asked, tucking the phone away. "I think okay," Amara said. "The science sections felt strong. The math was harder, but I remembered Dr. Reed's strategies." "Excellent." Daniel smiled, but something seemed off about his expression. "Let's celebrate. Dinner in the city? There's a restaurant I think you'd enjoy." The restaurant turned out to be an elegant French place with soft lighting and discreet service. Amara, wearing a simple dress borrowed from Isabel's closet, felt oddly grown up as the maitre d' led them to a secluded corner table. "This is beautiful," she said, looking around at the tasteful decor. "Have you been here often?" "Jennifer and I used to come for our anniversary," Daniel replied, then immediately looked as if he regretted mentioning it. Amara took a sip of water, unsure how to respond. In the weeks since Daniel had shared his past, they had grown closer, but Jennifer remained a complicated subject. The locked room still stood as a silent reminder of grief not fully processed. "I'm sorry," Daniel said after an awkward pause. "This was meant to be about celebrating your hard work, not dredging up my history." "It's okay," Amara assured him. "Jennifer was important to you. You don't have to avoid talking about her." Daniel studied her face for a moment. "You're remarkably understanding for someone so young." "Not that young," Amara said, surprising herself with the slight edge in her voice. "I'm 20, not a child." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes. "No, you're certainly not a child. I didn't mean to suggest otherwise." The waiter's arrival broke the tension, and as they ordered, the conversation shifted to safer topics. The exam questions Amara remembered, her thoughts on various university programs, her ongoing video chats with Zara. By dessert, they were laughing together again, the earlier awkwardness forgotten. Daniel was in the middle of a story about his first disastrous attempt at cooking for Isabel when his phone rang. Glancing at the screen, his expression darkened. "I need to take this. Excuse me for a moment." As he stepped away from the table, Amara couldn't help noticing how heads turned to watch him go. Daniel Hayes was an imposing figure, tall, distinguished, radiating quiet power. Even in a restaurant frequented by the wealthy, he stood out. "And I'm here with him," she thought, a strange mix of pride and unease filling her. What must people think? A young black woman dining with a much older white billionaire. The assumptions were obvious. Are they wrong, though? A small voice whispered in her mind. Aunt May's warning came back to her. Gratitude easily mistaken for other feelings. Was that all this was? Gratitude for his rescue, his generosity? Daniel returned to the table, his face carefully composed but tension evident in the set of his shoulders. "Is everything all right?" Amara asked. "A business situation that requires my attention," he said, signaling for the check. "I'm sorry to cut our celebration short." In the car on the way home, Daniel was quiet, distracted. Amara found herself watching his profile in the dim light. The strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow, the silver threading through his dark hair. He was handsome, she could admit that objectively. But it was more than his looks that drew her to him. It was his kindness, his integrity, the way he listened when she spoke as if her thoughts mattered. At some point during the silent drive, Daniel seemed to become aware of her scrutiny. He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. "Thank you for dinner," Amara said quickly. "It was lovely. I'm glad you enjoyed it." He turned his attention back to the road. "I've been thinking about something. The university results won't come for a few weeks, and you've been working so hard. Perhaps a change of scenery would do you good." "What kind of change?" "I have a beach house about 2 hours up the coast. Nothing as grand as the main house, but peaceful. I thought you might like to spend a few days there. Zara and your aunt could join you if they're available." The offer was tempting. As comfortable as Daniel's mansion had become, Amara sometimes felt like she was living in a beautiful bubble, disconnected from the real world. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "But what about you? Would you come too?" Daniel hesitated. "I have meetings most of this week. But I could join you for the weekend if that wouldn't be intruding on your family time." "Not at all," Amara assured him, perhaps too quickly. "I'd like you to get to know Zara and Aunt May better." He smiled, some of the tension leaving his face. Then it settled. "I'll have Mrs. Chen help you pack tomorrow, and my driver can take you up in the afternoon." Back at the mansion, they parted in the grand foyer, Daniel heading to his study to deal with whatever business matter had interrupted their dinner. Amara made her way to her room, her mind whirling with thoughts of the beach house, the exams, and the forehead kiss that she still couldn't quite interpret. Sleep eluded her, so after an hour of tossing and turning, she decided to go to the kitchen for tea. The mansion was quiet, most of the staff having retired for the night. As she passed Daniel's study, she noticed light spilling from beneath the door and heard his voice, tense and lowered but still audible. "I don't care what it costs. I want them found and dealt with," he was saying. "No, not like last time. This needs to be permanent." Amara froze, the words sending a chill down her spine. She knew she shouldn't eavesdrop, but something in his tone, cold, hard, utterly unlike the Daniel she knew, kept her rooted to the spot. "The girl suspects nothing," Daniel continued after a pause. "Let's keep it that way. She's been through enough." The girl. Herself, clearly. But what wasn't she supposed to suspect? "I need this handled before I join them at the beach house," Daniel was saying. "I won't have loose ends threatening what I've built." "Yes, including her. Especially her." Heart pounding, Amara backed away from the door as quietly as she could. Her foot caught on a small decorative table, sending a vase wobbling. She managed to catch it before it fell, but the slight noise must have alerted Daniel. "I'll call you back," she heard him say sharply. Panic surged through her. If he found her here, listening? Without thinking, Amara turned and fled down the hallway, no longer caring about stealth. She rounded a corner just as his study door opened, pressing herself against the wall in the darkened corridor, hardly daring to breathe. Footsteps approached, then stopped. After what felt like an eternity, they retreated, and his study door closed again. Shaken, Amara made her way back to her room, tea forgotten. What had she just heard? Who was Daniel talking about, dealing with permanently? And what did it have to do with her? The Daniel in that phone call had sounded like a stranger, cold, calculating, dangerous. Nothing like the gentle, thoughtful man who had rescued her, who had opened his home and heart to her. Or was that man just a carefully constructed facade? Amara barely slept that night, her dreams haunted by fragments of Daniel's conversation and images of the auction house where they'd first met. By morning, she had convinced herself she was overreacting. The conversation had been about business, surely. Dealt with could mean legally, through courts or settlements. Loose ends could be contract details. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and as she packed for the beach house the next day, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Daniel Hayes than she had allowed herself to see. What she didn't know was how right that feeling was, or how dangerous the truth would prove to be. The beach house, as it turned out, was Daniel's idea of nothing grand, which meant it was merely spectacular instead of palatial. Situated on a private stretch of shoreline, the modern structure of glass and weathered would seem to rise organically from the dunes. Inside, floor-to-ceiling windows framed breathtaking ocean views from nearly every room. Amara arrived Wednesday afternoon, accompanied by Mrs. Chin, who would stay until Friday to make sure everything was in order. She suspected Daniel had asked the housekeeper to keep an eye on her, which both touched and troubled her after what she'd overheard. Your sister and aunt will arrive tomorrow morning, Mrs. Chen informed her as she showed Amara to the master suite, a beautiful space with its own deck overlooking the water. Mr. Hayes insisted you take this room. He'll use one of the guest rooms when he joins you on Saturday. That's not necessary, Amara protested. I don't need the biggest room. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. He wants you to be comfortable. This is your vacation after all. Alone in the extravagant suite, Amara felt a pang of guilt for her suspicions. Everything Daniel had done since rescuing her showed care and generosity. Was it fair to doubt him based on fragments of a conversation she shouldn't have heard? But that cold voice, so unlike him, it haunted her. She spent the afternoon exploring the house and grounds, trying to clear her mind. The private beach was pristine with soft white sand and rolling waves. A path through sea grasses led to a small boathouse containing kayaks and paddleboards. Another path wound to a fire pit surrounded by Adirondack chairs, the perfect spot for evening gatherings. Mrs. Chen prepared a simple but delicious dinner, which they ate on the deck as the sun set over the ocean. Afterward, Amara tried Daniel's private number, wanting to thank him again for the use of the house, but the call went to voicemail. She left a brief message, ignoring the tiny flicker of relief she felt at not having to speak to him directly. That night, she slept fitfully despite the luxurious bed and the soothing sound of waves through the slightly open window. Her dreams were a confused jumble, Daniel smiling at her across the dinner table, then his voice cold and threatening from behind a closed door, the auction house where men bid on her future, Zara's tearful face, Aunt May's warning. She woke early, unsettled but determined to put aside her worries and enjoy the time with her sister and aunt. After a quick breakfast, she walked along the shore, letting the cool water wash over her feet and the fresh sea air clear her thoughts. Zara and Aunt May arrived just before noon, Zara bursting from the car with excited energy, Aunt May following more sedately, her eyes taking in the magnificent house with visible skepticism. This place is amazing, Zara exclaimed, hugging Amara tightly. Do we really get to stay here for 3 whole days? We do, Amara confirmed, returning her hug. And wait until you see the beach. It's all ours, no crowds, no waiting for a good spot. Aunt May embraced Amara more reservedly. This is very generous of Mr. Hayes, she said, her tone neutral. He wanted us to have time together somewhere special, Amara replied, choosing her words carefully. He'll join us on Saturday. Something flickered in Aunt May's eyes at this news, but she simply nodded. Well, let's get settled then. Zara has been talking about swimming since we got the invitation. The rest of the day passed in a blur of simple pleasures. Building sandcastles with Zara, floating in the gentle waves, collecting shells along the shore. 4 hours at a time, Amara forgot her worries, lost in the joy of reconnecting with her sister and the peaceful beauty of their surroundings. That evening they roasted marshmallows at the fire pit, Zara giggling as she set another one ablaze, Aunt May telling stories from her childhood that Amara had never heard before. It felt like family, real family built on love rather than obligation or control. Later, after Zara had fallen asleep in one of the guest rooms, Amara and Aunt May sat on the deck, mugs of tea warming their hands against the cool night air. You seem troubled, Aunt May said, her perceptive eyes studying Amara's face in the dim light. Is everything all right? Amara hesitated. Should she tell her aunt about the conversation she'd overheard? About her growing confusion regarding her feelings for Daniel? In the end, she settled for a partial truth. I'm just unsure about some things, she said carefully. Daniel has been so good to me, but sometimes I wonder if there's more to his help than simple kindness. Aunt May nodded slowly. Men like Daniel Hayes don't become billionaires by being simple or straightforward. I'm sure he has his reasons for taking you in. He told me about his past, Amara said. About his previous wives, especially the second one who died after being trafficked. He says he helped me partly because he couldn't save her. That explains some of it, Aunt May acknowledged. Guilt is a powerful motivator. But Amara? She paused, choosing her words carefully. Have you considered that his interest in you might not be entirely paternal? The question hung in the air between them. Amara felt her cheeks warm. You think he has romantic intentions? I think it's a possibility you should be aware of, Aunt May said gently. The way he looks at you, it's not the way a father looks at a daughter. Amara stared out at the moonlit ocean, her thoughts churning. Had she noticed something similar? Those moments when their eyes held a beat too long, the brush of his hand against hers that didn't feel entirely accidental, the kiss on her forehead before her exams. Even if that were true, she said slowly, I'm not sure how I feel about it. That's what concerns me, Aunt May replied. You're young, Amara. You've been through a terrible trauma, and Daniel appeared like a savior in your darkest moment. It's natural to feel drawn to him, to confuse gratitude with deeper feelings. I know my own mind, Amara protested, but without much conviction. Aunt May's expression softened. I believe you do. But the heart is more complicated than the mind. Just promise me you'll be careful. Take time to figure out what you truly want, not what you think you owe him. Amara nodded, grateful for her aunt's wisdom even as part of her bristled at the implication that she couldn't distinguish between gratitude and genuine attraction. Because the truth was she wasn't entirely sure herself. The next day brought more beach activities with Zara, who had developed an interest in the tidal along one rocky section of the shore. Amara welcomed the distraction, explaining what she knew about the small ecosystems while deliberately not thinking about Daniel or her conversation with Aunt May. By late afternoon, clouds were gathering on the horizon, prompting them to head back to the house. They were nearly there when Amara's phone rang. Daniel. Hello, she answered, surprised by how her pulse quickened at seeing his name on the screen. Amara. His voice was warm, familiar. Nothing like the cold tone she had overheard. How are you enjoying the beach house? It's beautiful, she replied, watching as Zara and Aunt May continued toward the house, giving her privacy. Thank you again for letting us stay here. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to hear you're having a good time. There was a pause. I wanted to let you know I'll be arriving earlier than planned tomorrow, rather than Saturday. Some meetings were rescheduled. Oh. Amara wasn't sure how to feel about this news. That's fine. We've been having a wonderful time. Good. Another pause. I've been thinking about you, Amara. About your exams and what comes next. Something in his tone made her stomach flutter. I've been thinking about that too. We'll talk more when I arrive. His voice softened. I've missed you. The simple admission caught her off guard. I should get back to Zara and Aunt May. The weather's turning. Of course. I'll see you tomorrow then. Around noon. After disconnecting, Amara stood for a long moment, watching the clouds darken over the water. I've missed you. Such simple words, yet they seemed to carry a weight of meaning she wasn't ready to examine. That evening, while helping Aunt May prepare dinner, Amara mentioned Daniel's change of plans. He's coming tomorrow instead of Saturday, she said, trying to sound casual. Some meetings were rescheduled. Aunt May's hands stilled briefly as she chopped vegetables. I see. Is that a problem? Amara asked. Not at all. It's his house after all. Aunt May resumed chopping. Did he mention anything else? Amara hesitated. He said he's been thinking about me. About what comes next after the exams. Aunt May nodded but said nothing more, her silence more eloquent than words. As Amara set the table, she found herself both anticipating and dreading Daniel's arrival. Part of her wanted to see him, to feel the reassurance of his presence. Another part remembered that cold voice behind his study door and wondered which Daniel would arrive tomorrow, the kind, thoughtful man she had come to care for, or the stranger with secrets she couldn't begin to guess. What she didn't know was that Daniel Hayes was bringing more than just himself to the beach house. He was bringing answers to questions she hadn't even thought to ask, answers that would change everything between them. The weather matched Amara's mood the next morning, unsettled, with dark clouds gathering offshore and a restless wind whipping the waves into white-capped fury. A storm was coming, both literally and figuratively. Zara, disappointed at the prospect of a day without swimming, had settled in the media room with a movie. Aunt May was reading in a window seat, occasionally glancing at Amara, who paced from window to window, checking the time far too frequently. He'll be here when he gets here, Aunt May finally said, setting down her book. Wearing a path in the floor won't make him arrive any sooner. Amara stopped, embarrassed. I'm just nervous. I can see that. Aunt May's expression softened. Would you like to talk about why? Before Amara could answer, the distant sound of tires on gravel announced a vehicle approaching. Her heart jumped into her throat. He's here. She moved to the front door, then hesitated, not wanting to appear too eager. Aunt May watched her with knowing eyes but said nothing. When the doorbell rang, Amara took a deep breath before opening it. Daniel stood on the threshold, his tall figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a light sweater, so different from his usual business attire, yet he still radiated authority and presence. Amara. His smile was warm, genuine. It's good to see you. Welcome, she said, stepping back to let him enter. How was your drive? Uneventful, though I had to hurry to beat the storm. His eyes took in her appearance, the simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, with an appreciation that made her skin tingle. "You look well. The sea air suits you." Aunt May appeared from the living room, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Hayes, welcome to your own home." If Daniel noticed the faint edge in her tone, he didn't show it. "Miss Chin, I hope you've been comfortable here." "Very," Aunt May replied. "Your hospitality is generous." A slightly awkward silence fell, broken by Zara bounding in from the media room, her movie apparently forgotten. "Mr. Hayes, did you know there are starfish in the rocks down by the water? Amara showed me." Daniel's face softened as he turned to the girl. "Tide pools are fascinating, aren't they? If the weather clears tomorrow, I'll show you where to find the best ones." "Really?" Zara's face lit up. "Can we go now?" "I don't think that's wise with the storm coming," Daniel said, glancing out the window at the increasingly turbulent sea. "But I did bring something that might interest you in the meantime." He returned to his car briefly, coming back with a sleek box that he presented to Zara. Inside was a professional-grade digital camera, waterproof and practically indestructible. "For documenting your tide pool discoveries," he explained as Zara turned it over in her hands, eyes wide with delight. "It has special macro settings for close-ups of small creatures." "This is so cool," Zara exclaimed. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." Aunt May's lips thinned slightly at this new extravagant gift, but she said nothing as Zara peppered Daniel with questions about the camera's features. Watching them, Amara felt a strange melting sensation in her chest. This was the Daniel she knew, kind, thoughtful, genuinely interested in Zara's happiness. How could this be the same man who had spoken so coldly about dealing with people permanently? The afternoon passed pleasantly enough, despite the growing storm outside. Daniel had brought board games, which kept Zara entertained as rain began to lash the windows. Aunt May remained polite but reserved, her watchful eyes missing nothing as Daniel and Amara moved around each other, their awareness of one another almost palpable. By evening the storm had intensified. Wind howled around the house and lightning flashed across the darkened sky, followed by booming thunder that made Zara jump. "The beach house is perfectly safe," Daniel assured them as they gathered in the kitchen for dinner. "It was built to withstand coastal storms much worse than this one." As if contradicting him, the lights flickered ominously. "I've taken precautions," he added, opening a drawer to reveal flashlights and battery-powered lanterns. "And there's a generator if needed." Sure enough, an hour later as they were finishing Mrs. Chen's lasagna, the power went out. Zara squealed in momentary fright, but Daniel quickly had the lanterns distributed, casting a warm glow through the rooms. "Cool," Zara declared once her initial fear passed. "It's like camping indoors." "The generator should kick in shortly," Daniel said, checking his phone. "But sometimes I manually start it to conserve fuel." "I'll go check on it." "I'll come with you," Amara offered, surprising herself. "You might need help." Daniel raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Bring one of the larger flashlights. The generator's in a shed behind the house." Aunt May gave Amara a questioning look, but didn't object as she and Daniel donned rain jackets and headed out into the storm. The moment they stepped outside, Amara gasped at the force of the wind and rain. Daniel took her elbow, steadying her as they made their way along a flagstone path now running with water. Despite the rain gear, they were soaked by the time they reached the small weatherproof shed that housed the generator. Inside it was dry but cramped. Daniel moved with practiced efficiency, checking fuel levels and flipping switches. The generator hummed to life, but he frowned at something on the control panel. "There's a problem with the connection to the house," he muttered, more to himself than to Amara. "Probably the storm disrupted something." As he worked, Amara watched him in the beam of her flashlight, his strong hands moving confidently over the machinery, his face intent with concentration. This close she could smell his cologne beneath the scent of rain. "Why did you really come out here with me?" Daniel asked suddenly, his eyes finding hers in the dim light. "It doesn't take two people to start a generator." Caught off guard by his directness, Amara fumbled for an answer. I wanted to talk to you. Alone." "About what?" His voice was gentle, but his gaze was penetrating. Amara took a deep breath. "The other night at the mansion, I overheard part of a phone conversation you were having. In your study." Daniel went very still. "What did you hear?" "Something about people needing to be found and dealt with. About it being permanent this time." She watched his face carefully. "You said, the girl suspects nothing, and mentioned me specifically." For a long moment, the only sounds were the pounding rain on the shed roof and the steady hum of the generator. Then Daniel sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. You weren't meant to hear that, he said finally. That's not an explanation, Amara pressed, heart pounding. Who were you talking about? What did you mean by dealt with? Daniel's expression was unreadable in the shifting shadows. It's complicated, Amara. And not a conversation for a tool shed during a storm. He checked the generator once more. This is stable now. We should get back to the house. No. Amara stood her ground, blocking the narrow doorway. I need to know now. I can't keep wondering if I've put my trust in someone dangerous. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, hurt, perhaps, or resignation. You think I'm dangerous? I don't know what to think, she admitted. The man I've come to know is kind and generous. But that voice on the phone. She shook her head. It was like a stranger. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low but clear beneath the drumming rain. The men I was talking about are the ones who ran the auction where I found you. The police arrested many of them that night, but not all. Some escaped. The ringleaders. Amara's breath caught. And you're, what? Hunting them down yourself? Not personally. But I've hired people who can find them, yes. His gaze was steady. These men traffic in human lives, Amara. They destroy families. They've been doing it for years. The same group that ultimately killed Claire. What did you mean by dealt with permanently? Amara asked, her voice barely audible over the storm. Brought to justice, Daniel clarified. Proper legal justice. But through channels that won't allow them to bribe their way out or disappear again. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. I would never take the law into my own hands, Amara. But I have resources that can ensure these men face consequences for what they've done. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by doubt. It was a reasonable explanation, but was it the truth? Why did you say I shouldn't suspect anything? She asked. Because you've been through enough, Daniel said simply. I didn't want you worrying about these men potentially coming back, seeking revenge for the auction being raided. I wanted you to focus on healing, on your future. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the chill rain. I would never hurt you, Amara, he said softly. Or allow anyone else to hurt you if it was in my power to prevent it. The sincerity in his eyes was impossible to doubt. Whatever else Daniel Hayes might be, in this moment she believed he meant what he said. Lightning flashed, illuminating the small space with stark white light, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The storm was directly overhead now. We should get back, Daniel said, dropping his hand. Zara will be worried. Amara nodded, stepping aside to let him exit first. As they hurried back toward the house, the wind driving the rain sideways into their faces, she felt lighter somehow. The fear that had been gnawing at her since overhearing that conversation had eased, if not entirely disappeared. Inside they found Zara and Aunt May in the living room, where a fire now crackled in the massive stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The generator had restored power to some parts of the house, but the cozy firelight seemed more appealing than electric lamps. Did you fix it? Zara asked, looking up from the card game she was playing with Aunt May. We did, Daniel confirmed, shrugging off his wet jacket. Power should be back to most of the house now. Aunt May's sharp eyes took in their damp appearance and the subtle shift in the air between them but said nothing. Later, after Zara had been tucked into bed with a promise from Daniel to check the tide pools first thing in the morning if the storm passed, Amara found herself alone with him in the kitchen. Aunt May had retired to her room, her pointed look at Amara clearly communicating that she should do the same soon. Instead, Amara accepted Daniel's offer of hot chocolate, watching as he moved around the kitchen with surprising domestic competence for a billionaire. Isabel and I used to make this on stormy nights at the mansion, he explained, stirring real chocolate into warm milk. Before everything. You miss her, Amara observed. Daniel nodded, his expression somber. Every day. She was the best thing in my life for so long. Even when she was angry with me, at least she was present. This silence between us now is much worse. Have you tried reaching out to her recently? Many times. She rarely responds. He poured the chocolate into mugs, adding a pinch of cinnamon to each. The last time we spoke was when I told her about you. Amara nearly choked on her first sip. You told Isabel about me? When? About a week after you came to stay with me, Daniel said, leaning against the counter. I thought she should know someone else was living in the house, that I was helping a young woman in trouble. What did she say? Amara asked, suddenly intensely curious about this daughter she had heard so much about but never met. Daniel's lips quirked in what might have been a smile. She accused me of having a savior complex. Said I was trying to fix my failures with Claire by rescuing another young woman. He shrugged slightly. She might not be entirely wrong. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way that touched Amara deeply. Is that all I am to you? She asked quietly. A chance for redemption? Daniel's eyes met hers over the rim of his mug. No, he said simply. That's not all you are to me. The implication in those words, in his steady gaze, sent heat rushing to Amara's face that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. Before she could form a response, a particularly violent gust of wind rattled the windows, drawing their attention. The storm's getting worse, Daniel observed, setting down his mug. We should try to get some sleep. Tomorrow may be a long day if there's damage to clean up. Amara nodded, grateful for the change of subject even as part of her wondered what he might have said next if the storm hadn't interrupted. At the top of the stairs they paused, his room in one direction, hers in the other. Good night, Amara, Daniel said softly. Sleep well. Good night, she replied, suddenly awkward. Thank you for explaining about the phone call. It helps. He smiled, the expression warming his serious face. Thank you for giving me the chance to explain. Not everyone would have confronted me directly. I admire your courage. With that, he turned and walked toward his room, leaving Amara standing there, watching him go and wondering why his simple words of praise meant so much to her. In her room, as she changed into dry clothes and slipped beneath the luxurious covers, Amara replayed their conversation in the generator shed in the kitchen. Daniel's explanation about the men from the auction made sense. It aligned with what she knew of him. His determination to see justice done, his resources to make it happen. And yet, a tiny seed of doubt remained. There had been something in his eyes when she confronted him, a brief flicker of, what? Calculation? Concern? She couldn't quite name it. As she drifted towards sleep, lulled by the now distant rumble of thunder and the steady patter of rain, Amara couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to Daniel Hayes' story than he had shared. Something important, something that connected directly to her in ways she couldn't yet understand. What she didn't know was how right that feeling was, or that the truth would be revealed sooner than she expected. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a washed-clean world of brilliant sunshine and debris-strewn beaches. After breakfast, true to his promise, Daniel took Zara to explore the tide pools, armed with her new camera and boundless enthusiasm. Amara declined to join them, sensing that Aunt May wanted to speak with her alone. Sure enough, as soon as Daniel and Zara were out of earshot, headed down the path to the beach, Aunt May fixed Amara with a penetrating look. Something has changed between you and Mr. Hayes, she observed. What happened in that generator shed last night? Amara sighed, knowing there was no point in evasion. I confronted him about something I overheard at the mansion, a phone conversation that worried me. He explained it was about finding the men who ran the auction, making sure they faced justice. Aunt May's expression remained skeptical. And you believe him? I want to, Amara admitted. Everything he's done since the night he rescued me has been kind and generous. Why would he help me, give me a home, arrange for my education if he had bad intentions? Men like him often have complicated motives, Aunt May said carefully. Not necessarily evil but rarely simple altruism. He told me about his second wife, Amara said. How she died after being trafficked by the same ring that tried to sell me. He seems to be trying to make amends for not being able to save her. That would explain some of it, Aunt May acknowledged. But Amara, be honest with yourself. There's more between you than benefactor and recipient, isn't there? Heat rose to Amara's cheeks. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Aunt May's voice was gentle but firm. I see how you look at each other. There's an attraction there, on both sides. Amara couldn't deny it, not after last night. The way Daniel had looked at her in the kitchen, his words, that's not all you are to me. Even if there is, she said slowly, I haven't acted on it. Neither has he. Not yet, Aunt May agreed. But the possibility is there, hanging between you. The question is, would such a relationship be built on equal footing? He holds all the power, Amara, financially, socially, even emotionally given what you've been through. I'm not some helpless child, Amara protested. I know my own mind. I don't doubt your intelligence or your strength, Aunt May said. But there are forces at play in situations like this that can be complicated. I just want you to be careful, to be sure of your own feelings before you take any steps that can't be undone. Before Amara could respond, the front door opened and Zara burst in, her face flushed with excitement, Daniel following more sedately behind her. Amara. May. Look what I found. Zara thrust her camera forward, displaying a photo of a bright orange starfish clinging to a rock. Mr. Hayes says it's a Pisaster acraceus, a ochre sea star. Isn't it beautiful? Very, Amara agreed, grateful for the interruption. Did you find anything else? As Zara scrolled through her photos, chattering happily about hermit crabs and sea anemones, Amara caught Daniel watching her with an inscrutable expression. When their eyes met, something passed between them, an awareness, an unspoken question. The rest of the day passed pleasantly, with a picnic lunch on the beach and a walk along the shore collecting interesting shells and driftwood. Daniel was the perfect host, attentive, engaging, seemingly at ease with both Zara's enthusiasm and Aunt May's reserved politeness. Yet Amara sensed a tension beneath his calm exterior, especially when he thought no one was watching. Several times she caught him checking his phone with a slight frown, stepping away to make brief calls. That evening, after another delicious meal prepared by Mrs. Chen, who had returned that afternoon, Zara again retreated to the media room, this time to watch a nature documentary Daniel had suggested after seeing her interest in marine life. Aunt May, claiming fatigue from the day's activities, retired to her room shortly after, though not before giving Amara a meaningful look that clearly said, "Remember our conversation." Left alone with Daniel in the living room, Amara felt suddenly self-conscious. He sat across from her in a comfortable armchair, the fireplace between them casting warm light that softened his features, making him look younger, less guarded. "Your sister is remarkable," he said, breaking the silence. "So curious, so full of life." "She is," Amara agreed, smiling. "Thank you for being so patient with her questions today." "It was my pleasure." Daniel swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Whiskey, she thought, though she knew little about such things. Children her age haven't yet learned to hide their wonder at the world. "It's refreshing." Another silence fell, more comfortable this time. Amara found herself studying his profile, the strong lines of his face illuminated by the dancing firelight. There was a melancholy about him tonight, a sense of something weighing on his mind. "Is everything all right?" she finally asked. "You seemed preoccupied today." Daniel turned to her, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled his expression. "That obvious, is it?" "Only to someone who's been watching," Amara replied, then blushed at the implication. A small smile touched his lips. "Yes, I suppose you have been." He set down his glass and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The truth is, I received some news this morning that's been on my mind. It concerns you actually." Amara's pulse quickened. "Me?" "The university called with your entrance exam results." His expression gave nothing away. They were exceptional, Amara. Top percentile across the board. They're offering you not just admission but a full scholarship to their honors pre-med program. Joy and disbelief warred within her. "Really? But I thought the results wouldn't come for weeks." "I may have encouraged them to expedite the process," Daniel admitted. "But the scholarship is entirely on your merit. I had nothing to do with that decision." Amara felt tears spring to her eyes. A full scholarship, her dream of becoming a doctor suddenly within reach, not dependent on Daniel's charity but earned through her own efforts. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll accept," Daniel suggested, his eyes warm with pride. "Classes start in 3 weeks. There's paperwork to complete, housing to arrange." "Housing?" Amara hadn't considered that aspect. "You mean, I wouldn't stay at the mansion?" Something flickered in Daniel's expression. "The university is an hour's drive from the mansion. Most students live on campus at least for the first year. It's an important part of the college experience." "Of course," Amara said quickly, surprised by the pang of loss she felt at the thought of leaving Daniel's home, leaving him. "That makes sense." Daniel studied her face for a moment. "Unless you'd prefer to commute. The drive wouldn't be impossible, and you'd always have a place at the mansion for as long as you wanted." The offer hung between them, loaded with unspoken meanings. Stay with me, it seemed to say. But what would staying mean? What would living under his roof represent as she began this new chapter of her life? "I should probably experience dorm life," Amara said slowly. "But thank you for the option." Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable. "Of course. It's your choice, Amara. All of this is your choice. You owe me nothing." The words were perfect, generous. So why did they leave her feeling hollow? "There's something else," Daniel continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Something I've been meaning to tell you but haven't found the right moment. The shift in his demeanor sent a tremor of unease through Amara. What is it? Daniel took a deep breath as if steeling himself. It's about your parents. The investigation into the trafficking ring has uncovered disturbing information. Amara tensed. What kind of information? The auction you were taken to wasn't the first, Daniel said carefully. Your parents had been involved with this group before. Cold dread settled in Amara's stomach. What are you saying? The police found evidence, financial records, communications, suggesting they had been paid to provide merchandise in the past. Daniel's eyes held hers, filled with compassion but unflinching. Other young women, Amara. Girls they'd taken in as foster children over the years. The world seemed to tilt beneath her. Amara gripped the arms of her chair, trying to process what he was saying. That's impossible. We never had foster children in our home. Not while you were there, Daniel clarified. This was before you were born and when you were very young. Your parents were foster parents for nearly a decade. The records show at least 5 girls passed through their home. All eventually reported as runaways. No, Amara whispered, but even as she denied it, memories surfaced, odd comments her parents had made over the years about ungrateful girls, faded photographs she'd found once in the attic showing her father with teenagers she didn't recognize, her mother's casual cruelty toward Zara as she grew older. I'm sorry, Daniel said softly. I debated whether to tell you at all, but I felt you deserved to know the truth. Why now? Amara asked, fighting back tears. Why tell me this now when everything was finally starting to feel hopeful? Daniel hesitated, then reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding. Because there's more, he said, his voice low and serious. A connection I discovered only recently, one that changes everything between us. What do you mean? Amara asked, suddenly afraid of his answer. Daniel's eyes held hers, filled with a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't fully decipher. 25 years ago, a 16-year-old girl named Maya was placed in your parents' foster home. 6 months later, she disappeared. The police investigated but found nothing. She was classified as a runaway. Amara's breath caught. Something in the way he said the name, Maya, sent a chill through her. Maya was sold at a private auction, much like the one where I found you, Daniel continued, his grip tightening slightly on her hand. She was purchased by a man who kept her captive for nearly a year before she managed to escape. By then she was pregnant. Understanding began to dawn, terrible and impossible. Daniel? The baby was a girl, he said, his voice barely above a whisper now. Maya named her Amara before she died in childbirth. The world stopped. Amara stared at him, unable to process what he was saying, what it meant. Maya was my sister, Daniel said, the words falling into the silence between them like stones. My younger sister, who disappeared when I was 21. I searched for her for years before finally finding evidence of what had happened to her child, to you. That's not possible, Amara whispered, though deep inside, something resonated with horrible truth. My parents, they're my parents. They have my birth certificate, my... Forged? Daniel interrupted gently. They were paid to take you, to raise you as their own. Part of a cover-up orchestrated by the man who had held Maya captive. A man connected to the same trafficking ring that later tried to sell you. Amara pulled her hand from his, rising unsteadily to her feet. The room seemed to spin around her. You're saying I'm your niece? That my whole life has been a lie. Daniel stood as well, his expression pained. I only confirmed it recently with DNA tests from items in your room. I wasn't certain until then, though I suspected from the moment I saw you at that auction. You look so much like Maya. So that night at the auction, you didn't just happen to be there working with police, Amara said, pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. You were there looking for me specifically. Yes, Daniel admitted. I'd been searching for years, following leads from private investigators. When I learned about the auction, that a young woman matching your description would be there. Everything has been a lie, Amara said numbly. Your rescue, your generosity, it wasn't about helping a stranger or making amends for Claire. It was about finding your sister's child. Not everything was a lie, Daniel said, taking a step toward her. I did want to help you, to give you the life Maya would have wanted for you. The education, the opportunities she never had. Does Zara know? Aunt May. The questions tumbled out as Amara's mind raced. Are they even really my family? Zara is your half-sister, Daniel confirmed. Same father, different mothers. Your parents, the people who raised you, did have one biological child. As for your aunt, she's not your biological aunt, but she did know Maya. She was the social worker assigned to check on the foster home. This last revelation hit Amara like a physical blow. Aunt May knew? All this time? She suspected but wasn't certain, Daniel said. When the police contacted her after your parents' arrest, she reached out to me, knowing I'd been searching for Maya's child. Amara felt sick, betrayed on every side. So the two of you have been watching me, waiting for the right moment to reveal this bombshell? Playing some kind of game? No game, Amara, Daniel said, his voice pained. We were trying to protect you, to give you time to heal from the trauma of the auction before burdening you with more difficult truths. Protect me? Amara laughed bitterly. By lying to me? By letting me believe. She stopped, unable to finish the thought. Believe what? Daniel asked quietly. That you cared about me for who I am, she whispered. Not for who my mother was. Something shifted in Daniel's expression, a deepening of emotion, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. I do care about you for who you are, Amara. More than I should, perhaps. The implication hung between them, shocking in its sudden clarity. Amara took a step back, wrapping her arms around herself. The implication hung between them, shocking in its sudden clarity. Amara took a step back, wrapping her arms around herself. That's not possible, she stammered. You're my uncle. You can't. I know, Daniel said, his voice thick with self-recrimination. Believe me, I know how wrong it is. I've fought it since the moment I realized what I was beginning to feel for you. Amara shook her head, trying to clear it, to make sense of this cascade of revelations. Her entire identity had been upended, and now this, the realization that the confusing attraction she had felt for Daniel was apparently mutual, and also completely inappropriate. I need to think, she said, backing toward the door. I need space. Amara, please. Daniel took a step toward her, then stopped himself, respecting her need for distance. I never intended. I thought I could just be your uncle, your guardian. I didn't expect. Stop, Amara said, raising a hand. Just stop talking. Without waiting for a response, she turned and fled the room, running up the stairs to the safety of the master suite. Inside, she locked the door and sank to the floor, tears finally breaking free as the full weight of everything crashed down upon her. Her parents weren't her parents. She had been stolen, trafficked even as an infant. Her real mother had died giving birth to her. Daniel was her uncle. And somewhere in this twisted web of revelations, there was the additional horror that they had developed feelings for each other that could never, should never be acted upon. A soft knock on the door startled her. Amara? It was Aunt May. No, not her aunt. A stranger who had known the truth all along. May I come in? Go away, Amara choked out. I don't want to talk to anyone. I understand, came the gentle reply. But you shouldn't be alone right now. After a moment's hesitation, Amara rose and unlocked the door, then retreated to sit on the edge of the bed. Aunt May entered and closed the door behind her, her face lined with concern. He told you, she said. It wasn't a question. Amara nodded, wiping at her tears. Why didn't you? All this time, pretending to be my aunt. I am your aunt in every way that matters, Aunt May said firmly, sitting beside her. Blood is only one type of family, Amara. Love is another. Did you know from the beginning? When I was a baby? Aunt May sighed. I suspected. Maya vanished from your parents' home, which I was responsible for monitoring, and months later, they suddenly had a newborn they claimed was their biological child. The timing was suspicious, but I had no proof. So you just left me with them? Amara couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. I tried to stay involved in your life, Aunt May said, pain evident in her eyes. That's why I became Aunt May. But your father grew suspicious of my questions and eventually cut contact. By then you were 5, Zara was a baby, and the family seemed stable. I had no evidence of current wrongdoing. Until they tried to sell me too, Amara said bitterly. Aunt May's eyes filled with tears. My greatest failure. I should have fought harder to stay in your life, to protect you. Despite her anger and confusion, Amara felt a pang of sympathy for the older woman. What about Daniel? Did you know he was searching for me? I knew he had been searching for Maya and any child she might have had, Aunt May confirmed. When I saw the news about your parents' arrest connected to a trafficking ring, I contacted him immediately. And you've both been lying to me ever since. Not lying, Aunt May corrected gently. Waiting for the right moment to tell you the truth. A truth that would upend your entire sense of self, on top of the trauma you'd already experienced. Amara couldn't argue with that logic, however much she wanted to. The revelations tonight had indeed shattered her, leaving her feeling unmoored, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. "There's more, isn't there?" she asked, suddenly remembering Daniel's expression, the weight of something left unsaid. "Something Daniel didn't tell me." Aunt May hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It's not my place to share it. But yes, there is more to the story. Something that explains why he was so determined to find you after all these years." "Tell me," Amara demanded. "I deserve to know everything." "You do," Aunt May agreed. "But that part should come from Daniel himself. When you're ready to hear it." Amara laughed hollowly. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready for more revelations. My entire life has been a lie. The man I thought was my rescuer, my benefactor, possibly more, is my uncle. How am I supposed to process any of this?" "One step at a time," Aunt May said, taking her hand. "Tonight, you grieve for the life you thought you had. Tomorrow you begin to build understanding of the life that is actually yours." Later, after Aunt May had left her to rest, Amara lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Outside, the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, a sound that had been soothing just last night but now seemed to echo the turmoil within her. Daniel was her uncle. Her mother had been his sister. The attraction she had felt toward him, the growing warmth and connection. It was wrong, impossible, destined for heartbreak. And yet, knowing this didn't magically erase the feelings that had been developing. If anything, the revelation of their blood connection made her more aware of every interaction they'd shared, every moment of connection, every glance that had lingered too long. Was that why he had suggested she live in the dorms rather than commute from the mansion? Had he recognized the dangerous path they were heading down and tried to create distance? Morning came with no answers, only the heavy certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. Amara woke early, having barely slept. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her head pounding from the emotional storm of the previous night. For a moment she lay still, hoping it had all been a terrible dream. But reality crashed back with merciless clarity. She was not who she had thought she was. Her parents weren't her parents. Daniel was her uncle. And somewhere out there was a father, a man who had bought and imprisoned her mother, who had been involved with the trafficking ring that later tried to sell Amara herself. The circle of horror was complete, the pattern nearly repeating itself a generation later. Slipping from bed, Amara moved to the window. The day was dawning clear and beautiful, the storm-tossed sea now calm beneath a brightening sky. Such a contrast to the chaos within her. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. "Amara?" Zara's voice, innocent and untroubled. "Are you awake?" Mr. Hayes made pancakes. Pancakes. Such a normal, domestic thing. How was she supposed to sit across from Daniel now, knowing what she knew? "I'll be down in a little while," she called back, forcing her voice to sound normal. "Save some for me." "Okay." Footsteps pattered away down the hall. Amara sighed, moving to the adjoining bathroom. The face that stared back at her from the mirror looked different somehow, as if the revelations of the night before had physically changed her. She searched her features for traces of the mother she had never known. Wow. Even the name felt strange, precious. A connection to a woman who had given her life in the most literal sense. After showering and dressing in jeans and a simple blouse, Amara steeled herself to face the day, to face Daniel. She couldn't hide in this room forever, however tempting that might be. Downstairs, she found Zara chattering happily at the kitchen island while Daniel flipped pancakes at the stove. Aunt May sat nearby, nursing a cup of tea, her eyes finding Amara's the moment she entered the room. "Good morning," Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral. There were shadows under his eyes that suggested he'd slept no better than she had. "Blueberry or plain?" "Blueberry," Amara answered automatically, hyper-aware of how normal this scene would have appeared just 24 hours ago. A family breakfast, unremarkable except for the luxury of their surroundings. Now every interaction was charged with new meaning. Daniel wasn't just a generous benefactor. He was her blood relative. Aunt May wasn't her aunt by marriage but a woman who had known her biological mother. And Zara? Zara was still her sister, thank goodness, but even that relationship was more complicated than she had realized. "Did you sleep well?" Aunt May asked, the question loaded with subtext that Zara couldn't perceive. "Not really," Amara admitted, accepting a plate of pancakes from Daniel, careful not to let their fingers touch in the exchange. "Me neither," Zara piped up. "I was too excited about using my new camera today. Mr. Hayes said we could go to the nature preserve down the coast." Daniel smiled at the girl's enthusiasm, though the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. "If that's still what everyone wants to do," he said, glancing at Amara. The unspoken question hung in the air: was she willing to spend the day with him after everything that had been revealed? Part of Amara wanted to refuse, to retreat back to her room and process her emotions in private. But Zara's excited face made that impossible. Sounds like a good plan, she managed, focusing on her food. Breakfast passed in a strange combination of Zara's cheerful chatter and loaded silences between the adults. Amara ate mechanically, barely tasting the food, aware of Daniel's occasional glances but avoiding direct eye contact. When they finished eating, Aunt May suggested that Zara help her clean up while Amara and Daniel prepare the supplies they'd need for their outing. It was a transparent attempt to give them a moment alone, which Amara might have resented if she hadn't been desperate for a chance to speak privately. In the mudroom, gathering beach towels and water bottles, Amara finally found her voice. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted quietly, not looking at him. "I don't know how to act around you now." Daniel paused in arranging items in a cooler. "I understand," he said, his voice equally low. "If you'd prefer to stay behind today." "No," Amara interrupted. "Zara would be disappointed. And hiding won't make this any easier." She finally looked at him directly. "But we need to establish boundaries. Clear ones." "Of course," Daniel agreed immediately. "Whatever makes you comfortable, Amara. I never meant to complicate things between us." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I think complicated is an understatement for this situation." A flicker of pain crossed his face. "Yes, I suppose it is." He closed the cooler with a decisive click. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for finding you, I could never regret that, but for how I've handled things since." Before Amara could respond, Zara burst into the room, beach bag in hand, eager to start their adventure. The moment for further private conversation was lost. The nature preserve turned out to be a beautiful coastal area with hiking trails, protected tide pools and informational displays about local wildlife. Under different circumstances, Amara might have enjoyed the educational outing. As it was, she moved through the day in a fog, going through the motions of normalcy while her mind churned with unanswered questions. Daniel, to his credit, maintained a respectful distance, focusing his attention on Zara while giving Amara space. Aunt May stayed close to Amara, a silent support as she navigated this strange new reality. It was late afternoon when Amara finally found a moment to speak privately with Daniel again. Zara had discovered a butterfly garden on the preserve grounds and was happily photographing the colorful insects with Aunt May's supervision. Amara and Daniel stood at a nearby overlook, watching waves crash against the rocky shore below. "You said there was more to the story," Amara said without preamble. "Something Aunt May said you should tell me yourself." Daniel's hands tightened on the railing. "Are you sure you want to hear it now? It's been a lot to process already." "I'm sure," Amara said firmly. "No more secrets, no more waiting for the right time. I need to know everything." Daniel was silent for a long moment, the sea breeze ruffling his silver-streaked hair. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but tinged with old pain. "When Maya disappeared, I was 21, just starting my career. Our parents had died in a car accident the year before, and I had become her legal guardian, though she remained in the foster system while I established myself financially." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I hired private investigators, worked with police, did everything possible to find her. For months there was nothing." Amara watched his profile, seeing the echoes of that young man's desperation in his face even now, decades later. "Then one night I received a phone call," Daniel continued. "A man, his voice disguised, telling me that Maya was where she belonged, and that I should stop looking for her if I wanted her to remain safe." "He threatened her," Amara whispered. Daniel nodded grimly. "I reported the call to police but they couldn't trace it. The man called again 2 weeks later, this time offering a deal, $1 million for information about Maya's whereabouts. I agreed immediately, desperate for any lead." "Was it a scam?" Amara asked. "No," Daniel said, his voice hardening. "The man gave me an address, instructions to come alone with the cash. I was young, stupid with worry. I didn't tell the police, just gathered the money, nearly everything I had then plus loans, and went." A sense of dread filled Amara. "What happened?" "I found a rundown house in a remote area. Inside was a man I'd never seen before who claimed to be just a messenger. He took the money, then gave me an envelope containing a Polaroid of Maya, pregnant, clearly being held somewhere against her will." Daniel's hands clenched on the railing. "And a name. Thomas Blackwell." The name meant nothing to Amara, but she felt its significance in Daniel's tone. He was a businessman, respected in certain circles, wealthy, Daniel continued, and completely untouchable. When I went to the police with the photo and name, they investigated but found nothing. Blackwell had airtight alibis, no connection to the house where I'd met the messenger. The messenger himself had disappeared. What did you do? Amara asked, though she could guess. The Daniel she knew would never have given up. I became obsessed, he admitted. Used every resource I had to investigate Blackwell privately. Put my career on hold. Spent years building a file of circumstantial evidence that he was involved in human trafficking, though nothing directly connecting him to Maya. Daniel turned to face her fully now, his eyes intense. 3 years after Maya disappeared, I received another call. A woman who wouldn't identify herself told me that Maya had died in childbirth, but that her baby, a girl, had survived and been placed with a family. She refused to tell me which family or where, only that the child was safe, and that I should stop investigating if I wanted her to remain that way. Me, Amara whispered. She was talking about me. Daniel nodded. I didn't know for certain then, but I believed it. The timing aligned with when your parents suddenly had a newborn. But again, I had no proof, no legal way to pursue it. So what changed? Why were you able to find me now, after all these years? A shadow crossed Daniel's face. Blackwell died 8 months ago. Heart attack on his yacht. With him gone, some of his former associates became more willing to talk for the right price. I finally got confirmation about Maya, about you, and about the trafficking ring that had continued operating all these years. When I learned they were planning another auction, and that a young woman matching your description would be sold. He shook his head. I had to be there. I had to see for myself. And it was me, Amara said softly. The moment I saw you on that platform, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, I knew. You have her eyes, her expression. It was like seeing Maya again. Amara absorbed this, understanding finally dawning. So the men you were talking about on the phone, the ones who needed to be dealt with permanently, they were Blackwell's associates? The ones who had taken Maya, who had sold me as a baby to my parents. Yes, Daniel confirmed. The same organization passed down through the years. I've been working with federal authorities to dismantle it completely, to ensure they can never hurt anyone else. The pieces were falling into place, the full picture emerging with terrible clarity. And my father, my biological father, was he Blackwell? Daniel's expression darkened. We believe so, though DNA confirmation isn't possible now that he's dead. According to the information I've gathered, he collected young women, kept them isolated in properties around the country. Maya was one of many victims over the years. Amara felt sick at the thought of her origins. Conceived in captivity, her mother essentially a prisoner. Yet here she stood, free and alive because of that same mother's courage and sacrifice. Thank you, she said finally, surprising herself with the words. For telling me the truth. For never giving up on finding me. I made a promise to Maya, Daniel said simply. The night she disappeared, we'd argued. She wanted more freedom, I was being overprotective. The last thing I said to her was that I'd always look out for her, no matter what. His voice broke slightly. I failed her, but I was determined not to fail her child. Impulsively, Amara reached out and took his hand. The gesture was simple, human, family comforting family in the face of shared grief. You didn't fail, she said firmly. You found me. You saved me from following her fate. Daniel looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face, his eyes filled with a complex mixture of emotions. I want you to know, he said carefully, that whatever inappropriate feelings develop between us, they don't change the fact that I am committed to being the uncle you deserve, to supporting you in building the life you want. Amara withdrew her hand slowly, nodding. And I'm committed to moving forward with that understanding. No more confusion, no more complicated feelings. It wouldn't be easy. Feelings didn't simply disappear because they were inconvenient or wrong. But naming them, acknowledging the boundary that must exist, was the first step toward a healthier relationship. Amara. Mr. Hayes. Zara's voice called from the butterfly garden. Come see the huge monarch I found. They turned together, moving back toward Zara and Aunt May, no longer touching but walking side by side as families should. The rest of the day passed more easily, the weight of secrets lifted if not forgotten. By the time they returned to the beach house for dinner, Amara felt a fragile peace beginning to form within her. Not acceptance, not yet, but the first steps toward it. That night, after Zara had gone to bed, the 3 adults sat in the living room, planning the path forward. The university starts in 3 weeks, Daniel said. I've arranged for a dormitory room as we discussed. If you still want that. I do, Amara confirmed. I think some independence would be good for me right now. A chance to figure out who I am in light of everything I've learned. Of course, Daniel agreed. And financially, everything is set up. The scholarship covers tuition, and I've established a trust fund for your other expenses. It was Maya's by right, I've just been its steward all these years. I can't thank you enough for that, Amara said sincerely. For giving me the chance to pursue my dream despite everything. You'll be an excellent doctor, Aunt May said, her first contribution to the conversation. You have both intelligence and compassion, a rare combination. What about Zara? Amara asked, the question that had been weighing on her mind. How much should we tell her? And when? Daniel deferred to Aunt May, who had more expertise in such matters. Not everything at once, the older woman advised. She's young and some aspects of this story are too dark for her now. But she should know that you are her half-sister, not her full sister, and that the people who raised you were not your biological parents. I agree, Amara said. She deserves some truth even if we shield her from the worst of it for now. They talked late into the night, making plans for the immediate future. Amara would return to the mansion with Daniel for the remaining weeks before university started. Zara would continue living with Aunt May with regular visits arranged. The legal matters concerning her parents, her adoptive parents she corrected mentally, would proceed, though Amara had no desire to attend their trial if it could be avoided. As they prepared to retire for the night, Daniel hesitated at the foot of the stairs. Amara, he said quietly, I want you to know that despite the complications between us, finding you has been the greatest joy of my life. Maya would be so proud of the woman you've become. Tears pricked Amara's eyes at the mention of the mother she would never know. I wish I could have met her. So do I, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. But I see her in you every day, her strength, her determination, her capacity for kindness despite everything. It was perhaps the greatest gift he could have given her. This connection to the woman who had given her life, whose blood flowed in her veins, whose story was now part of her own. As Amara lay in bed that night, staring at the moonlight patterns on the ceiling, she felt something shifting within her. The ground beneath her feet was still unsteady, her identity still in flux, but there was also something new emerging, a sense of belonging, of history, of roots that went deeper than the lies she had been told. She was Maya's daughter, Daniel's niece, Zara's half-sister. These truths were solid, immutable. And while the path ahead would not be easy, untangling appropriate familial love from the more complicated feelings that had begun to develop, processing the trauma of her origins, building a new life with this knowledge, she was no longer facing it alone. For the first time since the night of the auction, Amara fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, untroubled by nightmares or uncertainty. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, knowing the truth at last, she could rest. Epilogue, 1 year later. The university campus bustled with end-of-semester energy as Amara emerged from her final exam of freshman year. The spring sunshine was warm on her face as she crossed the quad, waving to classmates. She had come to know over the past months. Pre-med was as challenging as she had expected, but she had thrived, her natural intelligence combined with fierce determination earning her a place among the top students in her class. The scholarship continued to cover her tuition, while the trust Daniel had established provided for her other needs, allowing her to focus entirely on her studies. She had chosen to live in the dormitories, embracing the independence and the chance to build a new identity separate from all that had come before. Her roommate, Jasmine, had become a close friend, one of the few people Amara had trusted with parts of her complicated history. As she approached the campus gates, Amara smiled at the sight of the familiar black car waiting for her. The driver, Thomas, stepped out to greet her with a warm smile. Congratulations on completing your first year, Miss Amara, he said, opening the door for her. Thank you, Thomas, she replied, sliding into the back seat. It feels good to be done. The car pulled away from the curb, heading toward the mansion where she would spend the summer break. Though she had maintained her independence during the school year, visiting only occasionally for Sunday dinners or special occasions, the mansion had gradually come to feel like a second home, a place where her complicated family gathered, where hard truths had been faced and accepted. Daniel was waiting on the front steps when they arrived, his face lighting up at the sight of her. Their relationship had evolved over the past year, finding its proper footing as uncle and niece. The inappropriate feelings that had briefly flared between them had been acknowledged, addressed in several honest conversations, and gradually transformed into something healthier, a deep familial love built on shared history and mutual respect. There she is, he said warmly as she exited the car. The future Dr. Hayes. Amara smiled at the name she had chosen to adopt legally 6 months ago, embracing her true heritage while honoring the mother she had never known. Not for many years yet, she reminded him, accepting his brief hug. How was the exam? He asked, leading her into the house. Challenging but fair, she replied. I think I did well. Inside, more welcomes awaited. Mrs. Chin had prepared all her favorite foods for a celebration dinner. Zara, now 13 and visiting for the weekend, rushed down the stairs to hug her fiercely. I got an A on my science project, she announced proudly. The one about tide pools that you helped me with. That's wonderful, Amara said, genuinely pleased. The bond between them had only strengthened with the revelation of their true relationship. Zara had taken the news about their shared father with surprising resilience, focusing more on the fact that they were still sisters, just in a different way. Aunt May arrived an hour later, bringing flowers from her garden and updates on the community college courses she had begun taking herself, inspired by Amara's educational journey. As they gathered around the dining table that evening, Amara looked at the faces of her unconventional family, the uncle who had searched for her relentlessly, the sister who shared her blood if not her mother, the woman who had known her mother and now served as a link to that lost past. None of them related to her in the way she had once believed family should be, yet all of them bound to her by ties stronger than the lies that had once defined her life. I have news, Daniel announced as they finished the main course. The federal case against the trafficking ring is complete. The last of Blackwell's associates was sentenced yesterday. 20 years, no possibility of parole. A hush fell over the table. For Amara, the news represented the final closing of a dark chapter. Justice at last for Maya and for all the other victims of that terrible organization. There's more, Daniel continued, his expression softening as he looked at Amara. The authorities have released Maya's personal effects that were recovered during the investigation. There's a journal, and letters she wrote to you, her unborn child. I thought you might want to read them when you're ready. Tears filled Amara's eyes at this unexpected gift, her mother's words, thoughts, a connection across time and loss. Yes, she whispered. I'd like that very much. Later, as the evening wound down and Zara was engrossed in a movie with Aunt May, Amara found herself on the terrace with Daniel, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Thank you, she said simply. For everything. Daniel smiled, understanding all that those words encompassed. The rescue, the truth, the education, the family he had helped her build from the wreckage of lies. Maya would be proud of you, he said as he often did. But this time he added something new. And I think perhaps she would be at peace knowing that her daughter has found happiness despite everything. Happiness? Was that what she felt? Amara considered the question, looking inward at the person she had become over this tumultuous year. There was still pain, still healing to be done. But yes, beneath it all, there was a solid foundation of joy, in her studies, in her newfound family, in the truth that had set her free even as it had initially shattered her. I think I have, she agreed softly. Found happiness, I mean. Not despite everything but perhaps because of it. Every part of this journey, even the darkest moments, has led me here. Daniel nodded, understanding. That's all Maya ever wanted for you. A chance to live freely, to make your own choices, to become whoever you were meant to be. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Amara felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. From the terrified girl on an auction block to a young woman charting her own course, she had traversed a landscape of lies, betrayal, and shocking truths. Yet here she stood, stronger for the journey, surrounded by love that asked nothing in return except that she live authentically, freely, fully. The night air was sweet with possibility as stars began to appear overhead. Tomorrow, Amara would begin reading her mother's journal, hearing Maya's voice across the years. Next week, she would start a summer internship at the university hospital, another step toward her dream of becoming a doctor. In the fall, she would return to her studies, continuing to build the future she had chosen for herself. And through it all, she would carry with her the knowledge that had ultimately saved her, that family was not always what it seemed, that truth, however painful, was always preferable to comfortable lies, and that love, in its purest form, sought nothing but the beloved's happiness and freedom. For Amara Hayes, once a girl without a past, the future stretched before her, bright with promise and entirely her own.